Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. Today I'm here with Daniel Lyman. He is a mind-body practitioner who founded the Mind Body Therapy Center in Portland, Oregon. I look forward to comparing notes on how he and I do this treatment. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below, and I'll get back to you personally. Daniel, I'm so happy to have you here, and I feel like a joke is almost in order because there's so many Dans and Daniels that have been on this podcast.
There's too many of us.
And then there are actually too many, and I didn't even realize it. I thought there were more Davids, but it turns out there's just so many Daniels.
Dans and Daniels, yeah.
Well, it is one of my favorite names. So I really do want to thank you for being here. And in connecting, I was looking into what you do, and obviously we have a huge amount of overlap. So what I like to do before we even get to the overlap, because part of our overlap is our own personal stories with mind-body experience, I want to get a sense from you of what your story was. So tell me, let's go all the way back to the start. When was the first time we could start as a baby?
This is the way. Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you ever listened to WTF with Mark Maron, but that's how he always starts too. He's like, start as early as you can.
Yeah. I have listened to him some.
Yeah. I guess the earliest, here's a fun tidbit from the earliest thing I can remember. In like second grade or third grade or sometime around then, we had, yearbooks, and everybody had to write what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I wrote, I wanted to be a therapist. And I had completely forgotten about that until I was going through my old stuff and my parents moved out of their house. And I was like, oh my gosh, even in like second grade, I felt like I wanted to be a therapist.
Yeah, you were a born therapist.
Yeah, I guess. No, I guess the relevant story here is that I've dealt with a number of mind-body issues myself, but I never really thought of them as TMS, as we'd say, until I went to grad school to be a therapist. And then I realized, oh, this is what I've been dealing with kind of this whole time. Before I became a therapist, I worked in entertainment for a number of years, and I was very stressed out working in entertainment. And there was a period where I was developing really bad migraines based on, one, being terribly broke, and two, working 18-hour days, and a number of other issues. But I was just not handling it well. And I was able to kind of move past that through a number of other ways. I didn't really seek out therapy at the time. I didn't really think that was a thing that would help me with my migraines. I'm also a runner, so I've had periods of on and off foot pain. And there was a period where I really thought my foot was there was something seriously wrong with it. So I went down that path. But it wasn't until I went to grad school where I was introduced to this concept of like mind-body stuff that I really realized, oh, that's what was going on with me this whole time. That's what all that was. Now, I think because I was so busy, I never really got caught up in the fear of it all, to the point where my life spiraled around. I was just so busy when I was in my, mid-20s, just trying to make money and survive, that I think that was like to my benefit. I never was able to like sit back and get worried about what was going on. It was just like, I'm working 18-hour days. There's no time to think about any of this. But so I went to grad school, and Alan Gordon was a professor of mine. And he gave a talk about his work and his own experience with mind-body stuff. And he and I kind of developed a friendship. And then he asked me, he was like, hey, I want to start this center for, the Pain Psychology Center. He wanted to work with people dealing with mind-body issues. And he's like, I'd love for you to be, kind of the first employee here. And I said, great, I'd love to do that, because I was like, a job after grad school, that sounds amazing. Who knows? So, and it was, in the field that he had been giving us lectures on that I really enjoyed. So I was super stoked about that. And then I've been doing that since the center started, which is, I think, almost about 10 years now. In grad school, I was doing some work at various agencies with mind-body stuff, but not specifically. And so right after grad school, when I just started working in this field, I kind of took off, and I've been really enjoying the work. And
so
oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
This was about 10 years ago that you graduated, and you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, about 10 years. I'm kind of terrible with dates, but yeah, about 10 years ago.
Well, part of the reason I asked is that, I had 8 years of back pain, chronic back pain. And I was one of these classic cases where I didn't, I knew about the idea of psychosomatic issues, but I even misunderstood it. I thought it meant all in your head, which of course is not what it is.
Totally.
It's in the head becomes real in the body.
Yep.
But it was around 2011 I discovered Sarnos. That's 10 years ago.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And I was thinking about how far we've already come in
since
these 10
years
years.
ago. Yes.
It's been a really great 10 years in mind body experience. I think people are really coming around to it, but I'm really
huge.
glad for you that you were exposed to Alan Gordon
Yeah.
earlier in your career and without having chronic symptoms going on. So that's great.
Well, looking back, it's just funny because I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky person most of the time. So I can look back and realize, those symptoms were chronic. I was just fighting them as hard as I could to be happy
Yeah.
and be grateful that I was working in entertainment, which is at that point what I wanted to do. So like I was having pretty intense migraines to the point where I was, putting pillows over my head, closing all the blinds, and canceling all my work for a while. So
Right.
it was pretty intense. But for whatever reason, and I think again partially just because of luck, I was so busy. In order to survive, I had to go to work. It kind of pulled me out of that cycle that so many people get in of fearing it and becoming anxious about it and becoming, the hypervigilance there. I think I was pulled out of the hypervigilance, which did help.
That is great. I mean, it's a good point too, because it's like essentially you had chronic pain, you just weren't thinking of it as chronic pain, which helped you.
Exactly. I think to my now looking back and after all the work that I've done, I was like, my mindset, just not thinking of it as chronic pain actually really did help. Kind of forced me to, I didn't have the option of like not working or not, of just laying in bed for a long time. And so it was like, well, if I have this horrible migraine, I'll just, wear sunglasses all day long, which never worked, but never actually helped the migraine. But it's like, that's how I got to deal with this.
Right. So now tell me, after you met Alan and you started doing the work, how did you get relief from the symptoms?
Yeah. Well, so it's funny. Once I kind of became, one of the first things Alan and I talked about is like, okay, what literature is important to read here? And of course, we read Sarno and he'd already read that, of course. But he kind of introduced me to Sarno, and I read the book, and very quickly it was like, oh, that's what these migraines have been all along. That's what this is. This entire issue. And to be honest with you, that was enough confirmation for me that I still get, like a mild headache or a little mild migraine every now and then, but it's not like it used to be. Like I haven't had a time. I literally remember laying in my bed, like closing all the blinds, putting on an eye mask, putting pillows over my head, and taking like way too much ibuprofen trying to help, but it wasn't doing anything. And so I haven't had anything like that in a really long time. But so for me, the relief came from just the awareness, which I know is true for a lot of people. It's not true for everybody. Of course, I've been doing this long enough to know that it's a different path for a lot of people, but the relief came from the awareness of just saying like, oh, here's what's going on. There's nothing wrong with my brain here. I'm just incredibly stressed out or caught in a cycle of anxiety or hypervigilance in those moments. It
sounds also like getting to greater certainty about it was very helpful. And I know this is one of our points of overlap.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. That's why I say like the awareness, being conscious of, this is a mind body issue, if you will, not any sort of structural problem with my brain. Then actually what's coming to my mind right now is there was another time where I thought, I think I have diabetes because I'm tired all the time. And I was like, because diabetes runs my family. And so my mom was like, well, maybe go get checked out for it. And I was worried about like, gosh, what's my life going to be like if I have diabetes? Because I'm just exhausted all the time. And my doctor ran all the tests and was like, you're not diabetic. And that was, now looking back, I can look back and be like, oh, of course I was exhausted all the time. Like I was so stressed out and so like stretched to my limits there. Actually, I haven't even thought about that in years, but yeah. So again, getting confident in the diagnosis. And when my doctor told me like, you're not diabetic, I don't remember having a lot of fatigue after that, to be honest. Right. I'm just thinking, I must have stopped caring at that point.
Right. So we're going to get into the kind of the power of certainty that you and I share.
Totally.
I don't want to rush ahead though, because now I feel like we're at the point. Now we're at the point in the story where you're starting to work with these symptoms in other people.
Yes. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I wondered if you could take us through a little bit how that was starting out and kind of how you've evolved in your work and how you think about it.
Yeah. Very quickly, one of the things I love about being a therapist is that it also encourages like constant growth on this end. So very quickly, I learned a lot more about myself by working with my patients, and that kind of reflected back to me. Okay, here are the ways that I can, here are the ways that my brain works, and here's the good side of that, and here's also the downside of that in terms of becoming, kind of focused or a little bit OCD-like about certain things, as we are wont to do in this population. And so early on, that really helped me help my own growth. And I loved watching people get better very tangibly. In grad school, I did all kinds of different therapy, and I appreciate a lot of other kinds of work. But what I love about working with mind body people is, they come to you in pain, then they leave not in pain. It's so tangible, having clients that haven't used their arms in a decade or haven't walked in a long time, or you name it, and it's not always an easy path for people, but it's so cool to watch them go from that level of disability to that level of ability. I love that.
I totally agree. It actually, it made it almost hard for me to keep doing quote unquote regular therapy work, because I was like, I could be helping people so much, so quickly.
Yeah, totally. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
It's one of the reasons that I really just like telescoped into this work. I mean, in addition to the personal experience, which was mind blowing and life changing.
Totally. Yeah.
I love that there are things that we can do to change things. Actually, I wanted to ask you a question about that. I hadn't anticipated asking this, but now that we're into this part of the discussion, I was thinking about this.
Whatever. Yeah.
It has changed the way I do therapy, even if I'm not doing mind body work.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
I wanted to hear your perspective on that.
I'm almost exclusively mind body stuff these days, but for a number of years, I would also see occasional, a lot of people in the LGBT community would come to me as well for like LGBT related issues. And it has functionally changed the way I do therapy entirely, because some of the hallmarks of people that develop mind body issues, like myself, like yourself, other people, you can see the good and the bad of that, and you can see it in other people. And I don't say bad, that sounds kind of harsh, but like every skill, if we take it too far, it can be to our detriment. Yes. So you can see that in other people, and even if they haven't developed a mind body like symptom, some sort of physical pain or anything, I can see that they might be headed that direction, or that they might be exhibiting some of those traits, and we can curb those early on, which I love. It has fundamentally changed the way I do therapy, in that I think a lot more structurally about how we can do this. Especially in grad school, there was a lot of, it can be a little bit more abstract. And I think what I love about this is it does make it more concrete and more structural for the process of therapy. So I don't know if that fully answers your question. Do you feel the same way?
It did. But what I was, two of the things I was thinking about that changed how I do therapy.
Yeah.
One, first of all, I think I get so much information from what's happening in the body.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's huge. Yeah.
So that's one part. But the other part is seeing that mind-body issues can change that fast has given me a lot more faith that other psychological things can change quickly. Once you understand it, it's like, it was mind-blowing to me that when you change the way we're thinking about symptoms, and it can radically change your physiological experience and your psychological experience. Because I have found, so you know a little bit about my work from having watched some things. Yeah. So with the 3 columns, one of the reasons that I came up with the power column, or came to understand the power column, is people got better when their doubt went down.
Yes.
And then I was shocked to find, and this was true in myself, they also just started to become really powerful.
Yes.
It wasn't even the goal of things.
Totally.
It just happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so fun to watch in people. That's why I love this work.
So you've had that experience as well quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not surprised. But
no, I love that process of, I tell people, and at the beginning of the process, they rarely believe me, which is completely understandable. But this is going to change your life, and you're going to be actually really grateful for a lot of this pain, because it will fundamentally change how you can be in the world later on. And of course, at the beginning, they're like, screw you, I'm in pain, I'm not going to be grateful for this. And I understand that. Right. But, later on, I can't tell you how many people over at me emails, or even just said in session, like, I am actually grateful that I went through that process, because I'm happier now. I feel better.
Did you feel like you went through that personal process of becoming more powerful through this stuff? What was that like?
Yes. I don't think for me it was like a very fast process. I think now in retrospect, looking back over 15, 20 years, I can say, yes, that I'm a lot more comfortable in my own skin and more powerful, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
For some of my clients, I see it happen much faster than it did for me. So maybe I get a little bit jealous there, but I would definitely say, I'm such a different person than I was when I was dealing with like the migraines, especially.
Right.
I feel I like myself so much better now.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but my symptoms are a huge part of what led me there.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
Yeah.
not grateful for the time that I
Yeah.
spent in agony and all the psychological misery of it. But if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change it because of how much power it has given to my life, and my way of operating is so much happier.
I liken it to my own experience also with coming out. I'm gay and coming out as gay because so many people in the LGBT community really don't have a sense of self or a sense of power until they really own that part of themselves.
Yeah.
And it can be a huge turning point for people when they actually get comfortable in that space. So I actually see the same transition kind of happen with people in the LGBT community when they get comfortable in that space versus people that are coming out of pain. There's a sense of the
Oh
world
yeah.
is just so much easier.
Right. They
So
can be aligned with themselves.
exactly. Yeah.
It's funny because I actually so I'm writing this book, and one of the things that I wrote about in it, I hope this will come across well, but when I was talking to people for the first time
Uh-huh.
about writing this book and about my ideas about this, I said it's the one time I had even a slight inkling of what it would be like to come out of the closet.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Because
I totally agree.
okay, I wanted to make sure that didn't offend anyone because
I'm horribly offended. No, I'm just joking.
I feel like it was like, listen, I have this secret almost
Yeah.
of
Exactly.
what I actually believe and who
Yes.
I actually am.
Totally.
And it felt so good to come out and live like myself. So I think that's what you're saying, and
That is exactly what I'm saying. No, you're hitting the nail on the head. Yeah, I truly see the same process for when somebody comes to me who's grappling with their sexuality, and then they finally get to a place where they're like, wait, I know who I am and I know what's going on with me. It's the
yeah.
same thing as when people figure out what's going on with their pain and why that is present in their life.
Well, this is the same reason I was saying how it's changed my practice so much. Even with working with LGBTQ that population, I was always good with that.
Yep.
But I think I understand it almost from the inside out in a weird way.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
we
could
keep
talk
understanding. Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I cut you off. Sorry.
I just feel like we in this process, and it's part of what I love about doing what we do. I'm constantly learning.
Yes.
I was just in a session with somebody, and we were talking about the columns, and I was going through the emotions column, and I was saying, okay, so let's just go through the basic themes. And I suddenly realized something, and I was like, I'm well into this experience of being a quote unquote expert in this arena, and I was like, oh, it really is helpful to know the broad theme.
Yeah.
Instead of just always telescoping into what specifically is happening. And
Totally. We can get lost in the weeds.
We do. And
Yeah.
I think that's part of what goes on in therapy in general. We get lost in the weeds, therapists and patients alike. And so I just love that this kind of allows us to organize things. So let me jump to what you do. The Mind Body Therapy Center, is that your own? You
Yeah, this is
formed
well,
that?
I'm hesitant to call it my own organization because there's people that I work with, of course, it's a collaborative environment. But
but in terms of founding it, you founded it. I just didn't know if it was with Alan Gordon or if that's your own thing.
No, this is my own thing. So I'm still a clinical supervisor at the Pain Psychology Center. I've been there, but I kind of wanted to start my own thing, and partially because my partner and I moved up to Portland at the beginning of the pandemic. I was living in LA, but we moved up here to be with both of our families are up here. So we moved up here. And so I kind of wanted to start an organization up here. David Clark, who is based in Portland, was very excited about that in particular because there's not a lot of mind body therapists up here.
Right.
So yeah, it's my own organization, but I'm still a clinical supervisor. I still oversee a lot of the therapist at the PPC, at the Pain Psychology Center.
Okay. So tell me about your therapy center and how you crafted what you see as important in this work.
Yeah. Well, I think specifically it's, because this is crushing doubt here. I think that's a large part of the process for people is getting to a level of certainty about the diagnosis. So we work from a cognitive perspective and, do evidence sheets and kind of smaller tools and work with a lot of doctors, of course, to a lot of MDs to get the confirmation in the diagnosis, because that is usually the biggest factor towards people getting better.
Yeah.
Towards eliminating that that particular symptom, whatever it may be, whether it's migraines, back pain, knee pain. You know it. You've seen a million of them too.
Yeah.
One of the clinicians that I'm supervising, she came to me and she was like, I had 4 or 5 sessions today, and they were all different pains in different parts of the body on each person, but they were all talking about them the exact same way. And I was like, yes, good. You're starting to see these patterns here. So,
Yep. Yeah.
As a step back here, the getting to the confidence level is very, very important. Now, for some people, that's harder than others for a number of reasons. I kind of separate the therapy into 3 distinct techniques. Or 3 separate categories here. We talk about, cognitive, behavioral, and then emotional. And I find that the cognitive and the behavioral can go together to help get confidence in the diagnosis. And by behavioral, I mean a lot of exposure work. Mm-hmm. So right. I'm a big believer in bringing in humor into exposure work, because that kind of helps make the situation light, and people can then prove to themselves that they are able to sit, to walk, to be in their car, what have you.
Yep.
So we get to that confidence through cognitive work and through behavioral work, because again, when people get to that 100% confidence, so often the symptom just, goes away very quickly.
Right.
That's not true for everybody. And for those that's not true for, sometimes they get disheartened that their symptom isn't gone 100% at that moment. But it's a different process for every person. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah, well, I definitely have seen it. In fact, it's part of where the power column comes from, is I was thinking about what's happening for people when they aren't breaking through.
Right.
When they hit a plateau, or when they just can't get anywhere. And I think it really is important that we talk about that. Well, this is the way I think about it. Yeah. I always encourage people, there's a reason. There's a reason that you aren't getting better and the other person is. It's not a bad reason about you, but there is a reason.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. It's not arbitrary. So,
right.
Yeah. And I find that, when I first started the Pain Psychology Center, we were noticing some patterns. People would get 100% confident in the diagnosis. They'd be like, I'm pain-free. This is great. I can walk again. Bye. Then 6 months later, they'd be like, I've got this other symptom. I need help with this one too.
Right.
And I'm sure you've seen that 1,000 times, maybe in yourself. I mean, as I said, I had migraines and also some foot pain. So I could see that in myself as well. Mm-hmm. I also have some OCD training. So I come from that perspective as well. And so much of OCD training is also about not just becoming comfortable in the diagnosis or about what's going on, but actually becoming comfortable with doubt. Yeah. And so I see that getting confident in the diagnosis and crushing doubt, as it were, is really, really important early on, especially to help people overcome symptoms. But what I see in the long term is it's actually more successful to get people to get to a level where they are comfortable with some doubt. Because mind-body stuff comes up for everybody in the world. You're not going to, I always tell people, like, if there's something feeling a little bit off in your body, that's good news. That means you're alive. There's, if things are never perfect in our bodies.
No, it's the human condition.
Yes, exactly. So I do work with people a lot in getting to a place of being comfortable with some doubt, not a debilitating level of doubt, but recognizing, okay, I may not know exactly what's going on here, but I don't need to be hypervigilant, or I don't need to be afraid of not knowing here. Mm-hmm. Now that's a longer term work. I don't always get there with clients. That takes more work. I don't know if you experienced that as well.
I have. And in fact, the whole term doubt, one of the reasons I settled on that term for how do I think about this is I felt like it covered a lot of territory.
Really? Yeah.
And included in that is that I say this a lot on this podcast, but crushing doubt has a double meaning. Mm-hmm. It's the experience of being crushed by the doubt, and then it's the experience of crushing the doubt. And everybody who comes to this has had crushing doubt, mm-hmm. where they feel like, I don't know if I'll ever get better. And I say to them, look, it's not only fine to let that in, it's part of how you do crush doubt.
Exactly.
It's the first step.
Right. Yeah. We can't go through our lives being 100% certain about everything. It's just not possible. And
I would say we can't become 100% certain about anything that we haven't doubted.
I love that. It's very true.
Yeah. So I think I'm really excited to connect with you about this, because even in the mind-body field, and I'm curious what you find about this, I have not always been so sure that people are seeing how big the role of doubt is.
Yeah.
Is that something you've seen or wondered about? And I'm not saying it critically about anyone. I'm saying there's so many people who come to me and say, I keep going over the emotions. I keep going over the emotions.
Right.
Why am I not getting better? And I'm like, you're looking in the wrong column, as I put it.
Totally. No, I agree with you. That's like, I would, kind of similar. I think of that as like the emotional side of things. And I think sometimes people put too much weight onto that. And then they're still kind of ignoring the fact that they're living with this level of doubt. When I first started this work, I would, and sometimes I still conceptualize it for people like this. This is a functional anxiety issue. This is people that develop mind-body issues are more likely to have anxiety, and the inability to sit with that doubt is usually a function of anxiety. I had a friend who I explained this work to, who's very clearly not he's not a kind of TMS kind of person. Mm-hmm. And I was explaining this to him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I just assume it's because of stress. It doesn't think twice about whatever physical thing, it doesn't sit with him. He just kind of keeps going." Yep. Whereas those of us that tend to get more hypervigilant or focused on it, we're in a state of doubt, we're in a state of worry, and we're in a state of anxiety, essentially, about whatever that symptom is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's huge. Like, this is everywhere.
I really think that it is. And so I'm curious, did the term doubt, has that ever been in your own lexicon, how you talk about this? Or
yeah, absolutely. I would say I don't think I like clinically specifically use the word doubt, but I talk about that a lot. I talk about doubt, or what I talk about is like getting confident in the diagnosis.
Yeah.
So getting confident in the diagnosis of whether you want to call it like TMS or mind-body issue or whatever, there's a million acronyms out there right now.
Right.
But whatever you want
to know what to call it.
I mean, we could go through 8 or 9 acronyms right now, but getting confidence in that diagnosis helps eliminate that doubt. And that is what people find, helps them get better, of course. So I would say I don't use the term. I mean, I do use the term doubt. I just maybe I don't even really think about it now. Now every session I'm going to be like, am I using the word doubt?
I've made you doubt it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, but it is interesting with terminology. So the power column, that's another thing that I had to work with people on. I even had to work with myself as I was choosing these terms. Sometimes I got pushback from people where they're like, I wouldn't use that term because of this, or I wouldn't use this. And right. I was like, okay, well, I understand that. I need to think about that. But I kept settling in on these terms again for a reason. And I think they speak to me. The power column, the reason I settled in on power, because a lot of people actually, they need a different word, which I totally allow for. I'm like, fine.
Whatever word works. Yeah.
I have one woman who was like, I need to call it strength.
Okay. Great.
I've had other people who need it to be confidence.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me as long as it captures the essence of what I mean when it comes to power. And so I think we have this interesting thing about terminology and all the different people doing different things. And I'm kind of wondering how do we best come together on this? I don't expect you to have an answer on the spot with this. That would be asking you an awful lot. But I'm just curious what your thought is.
Clinicians? How do we as clinicians come together on this?
Yeah, because I think, well, one of the things, I did a video on the contradictions that people who are suffering face when they're, and when they're trying to get better from this. And I think it's an important part of doubt is to acknowledge, you know what? You are getting a lot of different information from different people. How do we organize it? And I wondered if you could talk about how you work with that aspect of things.
About the various information people get?
Yeah, but well, just because you think confidence in the diagnosis is so important,
right?
What do you do when people come to you and say, "Well, this person says this and this person says this"? How do you?
Well, and there's always an evidence gathering phase that I talk about where we're in discovery. If we were lawyers here, we're just gathering as much evidence as we possibly can about what is going on with our body. What is the symptom here? And I mean evidence in terms of what MDs have said, what emotional content has happened around the experience of that pain, and kind of our cognitive reactions to pain. Sometimes people don't even realize that they are ruminating, for example, or hypervigilant about these things. So we have to gather all of that evidence, and that gathering all that evidence together helps us, get to a place where we can say, oh, we've got enough evidence to know for certain what's going on here.
Right.
Did that answer your question? I guess you were talking about the power column, and I talk a lot about empowerment and how to make people feel empowered and to feel that level of power. And I think that's really important because so much of this population is chronically disempowered based on the level of anxiety or symptoms that they're experiencing.
Yeah, I also, I mean, you asked if you answered my question. I think you definitely did, but it's funny when you said that, I was like, what was my question? So,
it's still like early for me. I don't know what your excuse is. So now I'm just kidding.
Well, listen,
I'm just kidding. Too.
I have plenty of excuses, but I have to think about which one to settle on.
Being a father, that's a good excuse.
Yeah. So, but I think one of the ways that people can feel disempowered is by all of the onslaught of information. The way I think about it is this.
There we go. Yes, that's what your question was. Yes.
I feel like people have both too much information and not enough at the same time.
That's I was trying to get there and I just totally forgot. So as part of the evidence gathering process, I would most people have come to me having read a book or two, but if they haven't, then I'd recommend let's read these 2-3 books, and then let's stop reading. Actually, because so often in this population, we tend to be pretty hyper-focused. So people will have come and said, I've read these 8 books already. What more can I keep reading? Constantly wanting more homework and more information.
You have enough information already.
Exactly. When I first started this work, 10 years ago or so, I mean, clients would come to me having read 30 books, and I'm like, I haven't read 30 books about all this, But so we get to a point where we say, actually, reading more is not helping you. That's existing in the analytical side of your brain. And actually, we want to get to a little bit more of the emotional side of your brain so that you can soothe yourself without the use of a book or some sort of content, because so many people soothe themselves through content by reading, by gathering more information. It makes us feel safer. So I usually tell people, okay, you've researched enough. We're not going to do any more research. And meaning we're not going to Google this. We're not going to look up our symptoms. We're not going to, read any more books. We're not even go back and read Sarno again, because we've already done that 4 times. And, that helps a little bit, but that is actually, again, part of the hypervigilance to be constantly seeking out information.
Look, I had an observation, and we'll finish up on this, although I'm definitely going to want to have you on again if you're willing, because there's so much to talk about. I think that when it comes down to it, the antidote to fear and doubt is information. And so it's very understandable that people are like, well, I'll read another book. Let me just keep going.
Right.
But the observation I wanted to make is we can also get information from inside.
Yes.
We don't have to only get it from outside. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yes. No, you're spot on. I was like, is he going to say everyone should keep reading all the time to be safe?
No.
Yeah. No. It's
all.
We talk about like outsourcing our sense of safety versus insourcing our sense of safety. And outsourcing is gathering books, Googling, talking to 10 doctors, whatever. Insourcing our sense of safety is, gathering the information from inside and then responding to it in turn. So
and that really is what the power column is. It's insourcing information. It's knowing, it's like resolving doubt at your core self. Like it's a whole different level of reducing doubt.
Power column. So it sounds like, I love it. It sounds like you're superheroes here. It's like
I know. Yes. And I think people do feel that way. I mean, I've had people literally, I had a woman who's actually a good friend of my mother's on the podcast, who I helped get past a certain symptom, and she's not all better with every aspect of the symptom, but she says she feels like a superhero.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's great.
And this is such a big part of the work that we love. So Daniel, I want to thank you for coming on here.
Of course, my pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to connect with another great mind in this field, and a dynamic, fun person. And let's look for ways to collaborate on this, because there's a lot of great stuff out there for us to work on and help people with. But I'm glad you're out there with me.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I always tell other clinicians that I work with or that I'm in contact with, like, I feel like we're stronger together. So if we all are in communication and connection with each other, we can actually make more of a difference too. So
I absolutely agree. So thanks again, Daniel, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It was such a pleasure talking to Daniel for multiple reasons. Obviously, he's a very personable guy. He brings his sense of humor to the table. But one of the things that jumped out at me most, of course, was the fact that we share this idea about the certainty in his case. He was talking about the certainty in the diagnosis. I think the certainty about the whole experience of mind-body issues, and I think he would agree with that based on having talked to him. So it's nice to know there are plenty of other people in the field who are thinking similarly, and you can get some similar information from all these different sources. But another thing that jumped out at me as we talked was the fact that when you have too much information, it's like we're reaching outside of ourselves to get the certainty. And Daniel and I agree that you also have to go inside. You have to get to the point where inside yourself you can feel certain about what you know and what you believe. So I thought it was a really fun time with him. I'm glad we connected, and I'm looking forward to ways that I can find to collaborate with him. I'm sure you will see him again on Crushing Doubt. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and I'll get back to you personally.